Happy Friday, mathematicians. For a math workshop today, you need your math notebook, your blue resource folder that's inside your anchor binder, glue stick, highlighters, and a pencil. So from your blue resource folder, remember that you aren't taking this out, you're just opening it up from your anchor binder. On the left-hand side, you are taking out the 2 teach pages that say estimate sums and differences, and the one that goes right behind it that says page 31, and it starts with example. The table shows the number of students. After you get those 2 teach pages out, go ahead and clip the rest of your teach pages back together. Close your folder, and then make sure it's still in your binder. Put your binder back in your basket for later. Then we're going to open up to our notebook. The last lesson we had on Wednesday was on how to construct arguments and renaming numbers. So we're going to turn our page, and we're going to then number pages 30 and page 31. Remember, at any point during our video, you may pause the video to get yourself caught up and organized, and then push play when you're ready to continue. Now let's go back to our table of contents. We're going to insert number 30 is going to be focusing on the lesson estimate, sums, and differences. So this is still in our second unit on place value addition and subtraction. We're now moving away from just focusing on the place value part of it to moving into addition and subtraction using what we've already learned. And then we're going to put today's date, which is 9-11-20. Then turn back to the pages we just numbered. And you're going to put the teach page that has the title on the left-hand side and the one with the example practice reflection on the right. So use your glue stick. Quickly make a box around the edge like a frame, and then crisscross it and smooth it down. Remember to try to put it down close to the bottom edge of the page, so then you won't cover up your page number. If you cover up it a little bit, you can just go over it. Same thing with your right side practice page. Do the frame, the crisscross, flip it over, and then smooth it out. And then once again, go over your page number. So as I said in the beginning with when we were on the table of contents, we're going to be continuing on with our second unit on place value addition and subtraction. We're moving away from just our understanding of the place values and being able to work with the place values for our number sense, and now moving into using that information when we start adding and subtracting values. Today's focus is using the word estimate. And when we went through the lesson on rounding numbers, we learned that this is a vocabulary word that means that we're going to be rounding exact answers or exact differences to find the answer a little bit easier. So remember, estimating is another word for rounding. So we're going to be talking about that today. Take your highlighter, and we're going to quickly highlight the title to give us that reminder of what we're focusing on. And then in the teach box, we're going to start with the first definition. It says an estimate, so we're going to highlight the word estimate. An estimate is an approximate number or answer. So when we see an approximate, that means it's about, and that's another word we might see in our word problems. So it's an about answer, not exact. An exact is one answer and one answer only. This is a process to get close to. So we're going to put in parentheses close to an exact number. One way to estimate sums and differences is to round. So we're going to highlight that word round because that's another word that we should be associating with the word estimate before adding and subtracting. So we have 2 words that we need to pay close attention to that are also in our title. The word sum and the word difference. Sum means the answer for an addition problem, and the difference is the answer for a subtraction problem. So we're working with addition, so I'm going to put an addition sign above the sum, and then difference, I'm going to put a subtraction sign. So we're going to learn the steps in order to actually find the estimates, to find the answers for addition and subtraction. So our first step says for us to round. So once again, I'm going to highlight to know that this is the expectation that I have to follow. I'm going to round the number 54,792 to the nearest 10,000. So we know that we always have to know where we're going to be rounding our number up to. So we're going to rewrite the number to the side. So we say 54,792. This is when we can apply the song or the steps to the song to know how to round correctly. So put your musical notes as a reminder. So we can put song steps. Now we're going to find the place. In order to find the place, we have to look back at what they're expecting to the nearest 1,000. So that means I'm going to underline the thousands place. So we found our place, look next door, which means that we're pointing next door. The pointed number, is it 5 or more, raise a score, 4 or less, let it rest. So it's 5 or more, that means I'm going to let this underlined number raise a score. That means that it's changing to a 5. So I'm going to write it up at the top. Anything to the left of the underline never changes, so I'm going to rewrite the 10,000s place. The rest of the song lyrics say, look to the right, zeros in sight. So starting at the arrow, I'm going to change all the remaining place values to the value of 0. So I put the comma to show the break-in period, and we have 1, 2, 3 spots to now indicate that those have look to the right, zeros in sight. We can then look to say, well, what digit is in the thousands place? And this is just going through the steps that we just found. So originally the digit in the thousands was a 4. The next steps that we just talked about is once again looking at our music steps. That's the steps to rounding. So put your musical note. To round, look at the digits to the right of the rounding place. What is the digit to the right of the round or right of the thousands? So this is where we put the arrow. So we're going to say the arrow was pointing at the 7. If the digit is 5 or greater, so remember this is the part of the song we said 5 or more, raise a score. So in the directions it says if the digit is 5 or greater, add 1 to the digit of the rounding place. So we said that helped us understand that the underlined place is the one that's raising the score by increasing by 1. And it says if the digit is less than 5, leave the digit in the rounding place alone. So we didn't need to follow that part of the step because it was already identified as 5 or more. The next part of the direction says to all the digits to the right of the rounding place become zeros. So that's when we said look to the right, zeros in sight. And then the last part says, what is 54,792 to the nearest 1,000? So this is where we're actually going to record the estimated value. So I'm going to take my number I rounded to and then rewrite it on the answer line to say this is 55,000. So that is my rounded number. So this is a reminder of something we've already done in our lesson before. And we can even write the page number for the lesson that we did that on, which is on rounding numbers. We could find that on page 26. So you can write to the side, look back on pages 26 and 27. If you forget the steps and you just need a reminder, we always use our math notebook as a resource to look at previously learned lessons to help us. So now that we've reminded ourselves about how to round, we're going to move down to the next section with the actual practice problems. So it says round each add-in. We need to box that word add-in. That is a key word. Add-in means a number that's going to be added together. And it says round each of the add-ins to the nearest 10,000. So I'm going to highlight the place they want me to underline. Nearest 10,000. And then estimate, so once again, this tells me the processor, what the expected work is going to have in it. I'm going to estimate the sum, and we know sum was the answer to addition. So I see that we have our numbers written horizontally. They're asking me to then rewrite them in the blank. Well, I know that for myself, I always want to rewrite a horizontal equation to be stacked when they're asking me to add or subtract, so I can line up like place values. So I'm going to rewrite to the side the number 337,961. Then I'm going to stack it with the second add-in, 432,746. So all I've done so far is to take the horizontal equation and rewrite it vertically so my place values are stacked so I can add the right numbers. The next expectation when we're being asked to estimate, I'm going to write the label EST. This is just short for estimate. So I'm going to take both of my add-ins and point to the side to say that I'm going to round each of these numbers to show the estimated number. Well, in order to do that, we need to look at what they're wanting us to round to. So it says to the nearest 10 thousandths. So the 10 thousandths place, I'm going to use my pencil, which it's my pen, but you're using a pencil, and underline the 10 thousandths spot. Then I'm going to use the steps to our rounding song to help me round to the correct place value. So when we look or find our place, we've already underlined it, we look next door, because there's not really enough room to write my arrow underneath because of the addition setup, I'm going to just write it on top. So I look next, because there's not enough room to write my arrow underneath, I'm going to write it at the top, but then I can apply the steps of the song. So we found our place, that's underlined, look next door, this is pointing to the 7th, 5 or more, raise a score, 4 or less, let it rest. So it's 5 or more, which means that 3 is going to raise the score by 1. So I'm going to write it as that 10 thousandths place is now a 4. We know anything to the left of the underlined digit never changed. So that 3 in the 100,000 spot never changes. But now the last part of our song is look to the right, zeros in sight. So starting at the digit that I'm pointing at, I count over how many place values that are changing to a 0. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I put 4 zeros next to my estimated value. So then I place my comma between the periods with my trick going from right to left, count over 3 places, 1, 2, 3, put my comma, so it should be the estimate is 340,000. We do the same work to the bottom add-in. So we already found our place. We look next door, 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. So it's 4 or less. That means that the 10,000 spot is going to stay the same. So I'm going to very carefully put my 3 back in the 10,000 spot. That's why it's stacked to make it easier for myself. Anything to the left of it stays the same. So the 4 in the 100,000s did not change. But now the last part of the lyric is look to the right, zeros in sight. So I start at the arrow and then count how many place values are turning to a 0. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I place my 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. And then I use my trick to know where to place a comma between periods. So 1, 2, 3, comma, and then I rewrite the answer line. So now that I have my estimate for the second add-in of 430,000, I can add these two values to find my estimated sum. So we already have them stacked, so they should have the zeros lined up, which means they still remain zeros, remain a 0, remain a 0. My comma has to go in the sum, remain a 0. When I get to the place values that have value, I can add 4 plus 3 is 7. 3 plus 4 is 7. So my estimated sum is 770,000. Once you have your problem or your workspace completed, you can then plug in the information. So the first estimated added was 340,000. The second estimated add-in was 430,000. And then the estimated sum was 700,000. So we were able to use the information, pull it to the side to be able to spread out our numbers so we're not all squished. And then once we've solved the problem, we can go back and add the information where there's needing. The next problem is going to be the same, so I want you to go ahead and pause, and I want you to try the second one on your own. When you're done, I want you to come back and push play to check your work. So you should have taken your two add-ins and pulled them to the side to make them stacked, making sure your place values are lined up. So the first add-in stays at the top, the second add-in stays at the bottom. We then have to remember in the directions, it asks us to round to the nearest 10,000. So I have already underlined my 10,000s position. That means that the next door that's going to make the decisions is having an arrow to indicate that is where my eye needs to look. So we have to be able to visually recognize that the top number, the greatest place value, is in the 10,000s, but the second add-in, it goes up to the 100,000s position. So be very mindful that your numbers are stacked correctly. When I look at my first add-in, I'm looking at the 10,000 spot, but my thousands position is making the decision. So we found our place, look next door, 5 or more, raise the score. So it's a 7, so that means it's going to raise the score of the 9. If the 9 has to raise the score, we know that we're adding 1 to the value, which actually turns that 9 into a 10. Once we've changed that 9 into a 10, which is now 2 digits, we then have to remain the same with the rest of the song. We have to look to the right, zeros in sight. So everything from the arrow to the right changes to a 0. So we count the place values, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means we have to add 4 more zeros. Don't let it trick you to think, oh, well, I already have a 0 there. I already marked one of those 4. That is not the case. That first 0 that we placed is not part of looking to the right, zeros in sight. So be very mindful. Then we use our trick to count 3 over, 1, 2, 3. Put our comma. Our estimate for this add-in is 100,000. Looking at the second number, we once again find the place that's in the 10,000s, look to the right, and this is our neighbor. So look next door, 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. It's a 2, so it's 4 or less. It's going to let that 0 rest, which means that the 0 in the 10,000s stays the same. It does have a digit to the left. That does not ever change. And then we start with the next part of the song, look to the right, zeros in sight. So we count how many place values, 1, 2, 3, 4. We add an additional 4 zeros. Remember, don't let it confuse you if you've already written a 0. That's not part of the additional zeros because of the look to the right, zeros in sight. Then we use our trick of counting by 3, 1, 2, 3. Put our comma to show the break-in period. Now that we have our estimated add-ins of 100,000 and 100,000, we rewrite the addition sign, the answer line, and we can add our values. So zeros never change, so we just go ahead and add those. Make sure you have your comma to show the right value. Continue with our zeros, and when we get to the 100,000s position, we have 1 plus 1, which now gives us a 2. Our estimated sum is now 200,000. Once you've shown your work to the side, you have to rewrite it in the actual equation part of the problem. So our first estimated add-in we said was 100,000. The second estimated add-in was another 100,000. And our estimated sum, so that's the answer to an addition problem, is 200,000. The next problem is doing the same type of work for the setup and the estimating, but be very mindful. It is telling us to find the estimate of the difference. So we are no longer adding our two estimated numbers. We're now going to subtract them. So we're going to once again start by setting up our problem stacked. So we have 645,908. Stack the value 335,297. We then show the subtraction sign and the answer line. Just like we did with addition, we're going to put our label of EST and the arrows to show that we're going to do work. This is still under the same directions of rounding to the nearest 10,000. So we're going to look at the 10,000 spot, underline it once again, and point next door so we're ready to do the work. So for this one, we found the place, look next door, 5 or more, raise the score. So it's a 5. So we know that that means that the 4 is going to raise the score by adding 1 to the value. So If it was a 4, it's now turning into a 5 because we raise the score. That still stays in the 10,000 spot. Anything to the left of the underline never changed, so we still write the 6. Now we go back to the last part of the song. Look to the right, zeros in sight. So we count how many place values. 1, 2, 3, 4 place values that turn to a 0. 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. And then we look from the right to the left to add the comma where the break in the period. So 1, 2, 3, comma. Our estimated number is 650,000. Remember that when you listen to Mrs. Ling say the number, it's not 650,000, it's 650,000. Our next number is 335,297, so we found the place. We look next door, it's 5 or more to raise the score. So we raise the score of the underlined digit. So if it was a 3, it moves up by 1, so it changes to a 4. It's in the 10,000 spot, so I have to be very careful to put the 4 in the 10,000 spot again. Anything to the left stays the same. And then we apply the last lyric. Look to the right, zeros in sight. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 place values that turn to a 0. So we put the 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. And then we put the comma between the periods. So 1, 2, 3, comma. Once you do the work that is just like what we did in the original adding problems, this is not adding because we saw the word difference. So we have to be mindful to put our subtraction symbol and the answer line. So now we have to subtract values. So we have our zeros that even with subtraction, they stay 0 because there's no value. Comma to show the break in period. Zeros turn to 0 again. And then we're in the 10,000 spot. So we see 5 minus 4, there's more up top, so there's no need for us to stop. That leaves us a difference of 1. Looking in the 100,000s, 6 minus 3, there's more on top, no need to stop. So 6 minus 3 is 3. So my estimated difference is 310,000, and now we can rewrite those numbers. So the first number estimated was 650,000. The second number was 340,000, and our estimated difference was 310,000. So we are applying a previous skill of being able to take an original number, knowing what we're being asked to round to, so which place value to round, changing those to our estimated numbers, and then either working with addition to find an answer or working with subtraction to find the answer. The next few problems I'm going to have you do on your own, and then you're going to check your work. So look closely at what they're asking you to do. There are some problems above, and there's some problems below. The ones above, they're already showing you the work. You need to fill it in. The ones below don't have that work yet. You need to do that. So I want you to practice these 6, and then come back and push play so you can check your work with Mrs. Ling. When you first start your practice problems on the bottom, make sure you're looking very carefully, and some of your papers might be a little harder to tell what the numbers are. So just double check your work before you move on to the last 3. So the first one is an addition problem, so you might want to just darken up that symbol. So you have the estimated number for the top add-in as 5,000. The second or the bottom add-in is 3,000, and when we add those two values, you should have come up with an estimated sum of 8,000. The second problem is going to be a subtraction problem, so make sure you're looking very closely at that one. So the first number you were going to estimate to the hundreds place, so it's 542,800. The second value you're subtracting is 27,400. When you subtract, you have some place values that you have more on the floor, so you're going to go next door to borrow 10 more. So when you find your estimated difference, it's 515,400. For the third problem, you are showing addition again, so make sure that you just darken that up a little bit. The top add-in you're estimating is 50,000. The bottom add-in is estimated to 60,000. When you add those two add-ins together, your estimated sum is This one's going to be, sorry, I forgot my 0, 110,000. So make sure you look closely. The bottom ones we're going to be doing on our own again, but I want you to make sure that you understand what place value you have. If they do not underline or designate a specific place value to estimate, you have to learn the trick that you have to look at both values, and you can never estimate to a larger place value than either what the smallest number has or the one next door to it. So for this one, because our bottom value is showing just in the tens place, we're going to round to the tens place in both. So we're going to underline the tens place in both values. So that means that you're pointing to the ones place. This problem also is an addition problem, so just darken up to show that symbol. In the second one on the bottom, you have both numbers of the same place value. So we're going to underline the 100,000 spot to estimate, and then you can point to the 10,000s to use to help you decide what to do. And the last one is still a subtraction problem, and you're going to again estimate to the largest place value. So that's the 10,000 spot, which means the thousands position is making the decisions. So go ahead and work on those 3, pause your video, and then come back and check your work. So you should have finished your last 3 examples on the left side. The first one, you changed the original number to the estimated add-in of 4,230. So you were only estimating up by rounding to the tens place. The second add-in, you were estimating to the nearest 10, which makes 98 bump up to a 100. So it increases the digits, but we have to still follow the same rules of the 9 having to move up by 1, which makes it a 10. The estimated sum is 4,330. The second problem was still an addition problem. So the first add-in, we rounded to the 100,000 spot because that is the same greatest place value. So we then estimated that to be 700,000. The second add-in was rounded to the nearest 100,000, which was 300,000. And when we add those 2 add-ins together, we have an estimated sum of 1 million. And the last problem was a subtraction problem this time. So when we looked at the original, we are estimating to the nearest 10,000. So 24,300 was estimated or round down to 20,000. The second number, 10,125, was round down to 10,000, and then we found the difference. So 20,000 minus 10,000 is 10,000. Make sure you've checked your work and made corrections on your own page so you have the correct answers and the work that shows that. The right side, we're going to do the example and practice together today. So the example is working with a word problem with the chart to help us with understanding it. So it says the table shows the number of students at each school in the district. And then is, we're going to circle our first number, is 2,981 reasonable? And we have that keyword there, reasonable, we talked about before. Reasonable, we said, is when it means, does it make sense? So does this number make sense for the total number? So total tells us it's going to be an answer of the students at Wilson Elementary and Kwame Charter School, and explain. So I need to use my chart to find the number that associates with the Wilson Elementary and Kwame Charter School. So Wilson, we say, is 1,523. So I'm going to write 1,523. And Kwame Charter School is 1,458. So I'm going to rewrite that 1,458. And because it's asking me, is this going to be a reasonable number of students for this, I can use my estimation to find the answer. So total means that we're finding the sum, so I'm going to put my plus sign. Then I'm going to do the same work that I was expected to on the left side. Put my arrows to show that I'm rounding, and when they don't tell us a specific place value, remember, then we're looking at the greatest place value. But we have to be careful. If our original rule of looking for the greatest place value gives us the same value, well, then we might need to then go to the next greatest place value. It's just a matter of finding the more accurate answer that will help us make the decision. So instead of rounding to the nearest 1,000 this time, I'm going to round to the next place value, which is the 100 spot. So we're underlining the 100 spot, and then we're going to look at the tens. So when we do this, we're going to look at the next door to say 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. So this is a 2, so it's going to let my 5 rest, which means that just stays the same. So my 5 stays in the 100 spot. Anything to the left of the underline stays the same. And then we use the following steps. Look to the right, zeros in sight. So then we turn those 2 to zeros. We use the rule to place our comma between the periods. So 1, 2, 3, put the comma. So my estimated add-in is 1,500. And this is just giving me a little bit more accurate of an estimate. The next one, we're doing the same thing. So we have our hundreds place underline. We're looking next door. So it's 5 or more, going to raise the score. So that means the underlying number is being raised by 1. So if it originally was a 4, we're moving up to a 5, and it stays in the same place value. So that 4 turns into a 5. Then we're going to keep anything to the left exactly the same. And then we look to the right, zeros in sight. So we have 1, 2 place values. So we're putting those as zeros now. We use the rule to place our comma between the periods, count over 3, keep the same symbol for the type of problem, and the answer. Now we can go ahead and show the addition. So we have zeros, stay 0, 0 stays 0. 5 plus 5 gives me 10, so I record the 0, regroup my 1, place the comma. 1 plus 1 plus 1 gives me 3. So my estimate of those two values is 3,000. When we look at the number that they've given, we can tell that this estimate is close to their exact answer. So we then can tell whether or not this is considered to be understandable or the word reasonable. So we're going to write our explanation. We can say our estimated sum is the same as the rounded number. And the reason why I wrote the same, because if we took our number of 2,981 and I did use the greatest place value to round to, I would say my next door, so I found my place, look next door, 5 or more, raise the score, so it's 5 or more, so it's going to raise the score of the underlying digit, which then means that 2 turned to a 3, and then look to the right, zeros in sight, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we would have had 3,000. And because the estimate from our original number and of our estimated add-ins is identical, we can then say that this is a reasonable answer. Moving on to the practice problem, it says, last week Mallory flew 2 round trips. We're going to write the numbers, 3,720. Make sure that you circle that with the label. And 5,985 miles. Which is the best estimate for the total distance? So underline your question, box any more keywords. So we have total, but we also want to box best estimate. So we're going to add these two values together after we've estimated. So we once again set up our problem by pulling those two numbers to the side. We're going to round to the nearest greatest place value. So underline the thousands, point to the hundreds. So we look at the 3, we look next door. This is 5 or more, going to raise the score of the 3 up to the next place, which is 4. Look to the right, zeros in sight. So we have 1, 2, 3 spots. 1, 2, 3 spots. Place our comma in the correct spot. The next value, we're looking at the thousands place. Look next door at the 9. It's 5 or more, going to raise the score. So it raises the score of the underline, so that 5 changes to a 6. Look to the right, zeros in sight. So we have 1, 2, 3 spots, means 3 zeros. Place the comma where it's needed. We can then add those two values together to get a sum of 10,000. We can then look at our answer choices. We have to find the one that's closest to our answer. So we had 11,000, 9,700, 8,700 or 8,000. The closest to 10,000 is B, so we can go ahead and mark B as our answer choice. Moving to the next one, it says use estimation. So once again, we're going to box that keyword telling us what to do. Use estimation to decide what is a reasonable. We know that's a keyword, but we're going to box the word different. So it's subtraction. So we have to rewrite the problem. So 38,041 minus 19,558. So we always have to stack and then pull to the side to find estimates. So for this one, we're going to be looking at, well, how can we find a reasonable estimation? So for this, I'm going to round. We're going to round up to, let's see, because if we look at all these numbers, we know that we're going to have to be as close as possible. So I'm going to not round to the greatest place value because it might be a little too hard for us to find the difference. So I'm going to go back into my ones period, and I'm going to go to the nearest 100. And we oftentimes will need to use our answer choices if they've given us multiple choice to help us figure out what we want to round to. And sometimes it's a trial and error that you might try to the greatest, and then you might see that you need to actually try a different place value instead. So for this one, we should be pulling our numbers to the side, and then this 4 is going to keep that 0 the same. So I'm going to keep this as 38,000. The second number we're going to round, so the 5 in the tens place tells me the 5 in the hundreds is going to go up by 1, so this would give me 19,600. And then if we find the difference, we can subtract. So we have 0 minus 0, says 0. The next place is 0 minus 0. Now in the hundreds place, we have 0 minus 6, more on the floor, go next door, borrow 10 more. So I borrow, that leaves it a 7. The 10 goes to the number or the digit that was already there. Now I have 10 minus 6 leaves me the difference of 4. Place my comma. In the thousand spot, 7 minus 9, more on the floor, go next door, borrow 10 more. So that 3 turns to a 2. The 10 that I'm borrowing is added to the value already there. So if I had a 7 and I'm adding a 10 to it, it's now a 17. So 17 minus 9 should leave me the difference of 8. And then the 10,000s, I have 2 minus 1. That means more up top, no need to stop. I have 1. So if I look at my answer, 18,400 of my estimated difference, that's going to help me quickly eliminate the first 2 because they're a little too far away. The third one is super duper close. I'm only off by about 73. So we say that is the closest one, and we double check the fourth just to make sure. This is still going to be a little too far, so our most accurate number is C. Today, you're going to write your own reflection. Make sure that you have 3 to 5 sentences. You can use your sentence stems at the beginning of your notebook. Remember, my favorite that I always use is a sequential ordering of steps. So first, this is what I do, next, then, and finally. Your classwork today is in the same Envision workbook that you used on our previous lesson on Wednesday. That's the thin, skinny one that has the black and white pages. You are going to complete pages 13 and 14, the even numbers on the back and the front, and that is called topic 2.2, estimate sums and differences. When you're done, take a picture of your completed notebook pages and your classwork and submit it to this assignment.